Thank you, Lord, for gathering us here today to not only listen to your word, but understand what society pushes towards us and how we should be able to glorify your name and protect what is biblically right. So we ask you, Lord, to guide these speakers today and put the right words in their mouths so they can lead us through the right path. Through the intercessions of St. Mary and all the saints, we pray to you thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. It's not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For Jesus Christ our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
I know my numbers.
You guys ready? So we're going to start off with a little bit of a fact. I wouldn't call it fun fact because it's kind of a sad fact, but how many abortions do you think happen in the U.S. every year?
30,000.
A little higher.
It's like 800.
It's around 700,000 abortions in the U.S. every year. Around 40 to 50 million estimated worldwide.
All right. Okay.
Is that
That was a
voluntary?
big slide. Huh?
What?
Those are voluntary abortions?
Those are abortions all
That's all
grouped together.
Okay.
All right. So we're gonna first talk about where the controversy all started. So it started with Roe versus Wade, and Roe versus Wade was about a lady called Norma McCorvey who wanted an abortion. She's a single mother, so she wanted an abortion, but she wasn't allowed to because at the time, the Texas law stated that you can only get an abortion if your life was in danger, if the woman's life was in danger. So she wasn't allowed to, so she sued the Texas government. The Texas government, and as a result, the court ruled a 7-2 decision, and because of it, they allowed every single state to allow abortions, and each state can have at least one clinic. And as a result, now abortion is legal in all states, and from there was major controversy in regards to whether it was morally adequate, and the battle between personal liberty, so a woman's ability to choose to have an abortion, which those who support it are known as pro-choice, and then that abortion is completely wrong altogether, and those who support it are known as pro-life. And so there were some issues regarding abortion in regards to whether it was morally correct or not, and some special circumstances that they talk about is in cases of rape or in cases of if a woman's life is endangered during childbearing. And so those two parts played a major role in the controversial issue and the debate.
So we're going to go through, we have a little chart, and it's talking about a couple of arguments that pro-life and pro-choice have made in their case for this. So we'll start off with pro-life. So a lot of people see that abortion is murder. And there was actually a state law put in called the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, where let's say a woman is pregnant and she gets murdered. Then the person that did the crime would actually get charged for both murders, the murder of the mom and the child. So it shows that they treat the fetus, or they treat the unborn child as a human being with human basic rights. So that act went into effect about 30 years ago or so. Another argument that pro-life people choose is that life begins at conception. And so therefore unborn babies have human rights. So I'll go further down the road when it comes to our Coptic church and what we believe, but this is part of our belief that at conception we have our rights. We have been known And so it is not a fetus without a soul. So at conception, you are a human being and you deserve your human rights. Another research that has been shown is pain can be detected in the fetus by the first semester. So recent research has shown that a fetus can feel pain as early as 8 weeks. The numbers do differ a little bit. Some research shows 8 weeks, some research shows closer to 14 weeks, but they're saying that they have seen on ultrasound when they do they go through with an abortion, they could see the baby screaming on the ultrasound as they're inducing the abortion. And so that has been an argument against abortion, that it's cruel and painful for the baby. Now we have a couple of other examples for pro-choice. So pro-choice, they're saying that abortion is a legal right. So the Supreme Court went through, which is the law of the land, and they took a look at all the facts, and they said that it is a legal right for the woman to do what is best for her. And it's up to her and her choice to do with what is deemed inside of her body. Another argument that has been made with pro-choice is reproductive choice empowers women by giving them choice over their own bodies. So this is more came along with the feministic movement. There's nothing wrong with feminism per se, but with the feministic movements, there's been a lot of different things that have been said, in different areas. But one of the things is that, a woman should have control over her body, what she does with her body. Yes, go ahead.
Just for clarity's sake, can you expand a little bit on what Roe versus Wade, the legal argument as far as, guess what I'm trying to say is, when you say the abortion is a legal right, what is it that the Supreme Court, do you know, have you looked at?
So Roe versus Wade, so Norma McCurvey's whole argument was the fact that a woman's right to what happens with her body and in her body, and it is protected under the 14th Amendment, which was her major argument, that the 14th Amendment protected our privacy, and so privacy over her body is what her major argument was about. Right. And then because of that, she was saying that since abortion is a legal right according to the ruling of that case, no one else, if it's protected by the law and it's my body, then no one should tell me anything about it, which is what's based on.
Did that answer your question?
Right, and I just wanted for the group, this is something I've looked into a lot. Is that clear for everybody? Because this is a really cornerstone decision that affects a lot of other laws that come out. And what they're saying is absolutely correct. What they determined was that not only is it a legal right, it is a constitutional right based on the 14th Amendment. So it is an expansion of what the 14th Amendment states. So it's a direct response to the 14th Amendment. It's not just saying it's a legal opinion on the Supreme Court, but it's a extension of the 14th Amendment. I guess the point I'm trying to make.
Absolutely. One of the last arguments that I have that pro-choice people have made is kind of like the opposite. So some research has shown that the pain can be detected by a fetus, but pro-choice, a lot of arguments is that embryos and fetuses are not independent, self-determining beings, so they're not fully formed humans yet. That's why they don't have the basic human rights that we have. And so they're saying that abortion is not killing a baby, it's just ending the progression of a pregnancy. So that is an argument that has been made. So these are just some arguments that you might run across when you talk to someone about abortion. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what our church believes about abortion. So we've gathered a whole array of information from the Southern Diocese, from the diocese through the LA Church, and our diocese in Egypt. There we go. Okay. So what does our church say, and what does our Bible show? So it shows that life begins at the moment of conception, and that the fetus is regarded as a living being that has the right to both life and dignity. Again, we cannot agree that one human being's freedom can be based on denying another human being's right. So what that means is, yes, we definitely want women to be empowered and to make the best decisions for themselves, but it shouldn't be at the cost of another human being's life. And so that is one of the big arguments that our church poses against abortion. Obviously, there are limits to our actions, and so, for example, our church frowns upon, marking on your body, like tattoos. So imagine when you take it even several steps further and do damage to another human being inside your body. So just because it's your body, that does not mean you can do with it whatever you please. At the end of the day, it's actually the property of God. We do not own our body, unlike to popular belief in today's society and culture. One of the things that, I saw in the diocese that they were saying as a response is, God saying, if we agree on abortion, we are not absolved. Now, this is not from the Bible. This is, Bishop Yusuf speaking this. And this, before I go further and explain this, would anyone like to guess what this means?
Can you say that again?
If we agree on abortion, we are not absolved. This is from Bishop Yusuf, actually. Does anyone like to take a guess?
And do you need to clarify what's absolved mean?
So when you're absolved from your sins,
Is
you're
it because
forgiven.
these kids have like the sin of Adam or whatever, and like you killed them before?
Say that one more time.
Is that right or I don't know? But like isn't it like because we're born with the sin of Adam and Eve, like you didn't give them a chance to like repent or anything or like be baptized, or you didn't give them a chance to be absolved?
That's not necessarily what this means, but that's actually a very good point. And I'm glad you brought that up because we'll discuss that. But that's a very good point. So pretty much what it's talking about is what I was trying to explain, that our body is not ours. So when you murder a child that's developing, if we believe that life begins at the moment of conception, then we believe that an unborn baby has a soul, has a life. And so when you go through an abortion, no matter how early, it is taking a life away that God has given. And that is, unlike what some people might like to call it, it's murder in the eyes of God. And so that's why if we agree on abortion, we are not absolved. So we are not forgiven for an unforgiven murder just because we deem it fit for what we liked. So one thing that has been brought up about is with technology nowadays, you can do ultrasounds, you can do a lot of diagnostic research to see if your baby will be born with any sort of handicap, disability. So physical, mental, they can check for Down syndrome now. So at the end of the day, some people now think, well, why would I bring this physically or mentally disabled baby in this world if I can foresee it? I might as well just terminate the pregnancy so they don't come into suffering. So that has been an argument that's said, but I would like to get y'all's opinion on that before I answer that statement. How do y'all feel about that?
Let's back up. What you're saying is actually really, very enlightening. So what Bishop Yusuf is saying, that no one is forgiven that commits abortion unless you ask for forgiveness. And did anybody know that?
Well, I think he's not even just talking about
but
people
beyond
who
that,
commit.
what about for
He's
medical
talking-
reasons?
He's
and
not
things
even talking about people who commit. I think he's saying if you support abortion, those babies' blood are on your hands, not just the committer but the supporter.
Absolutely, because as a society we pass laws that either legalize it or not. So
that's the first step. The second step is, for medical reasons.
Yeah.
And how does our church view that as well?
So yeah, we're gonna go. There's a couple more slides about that. So our church, when it comes to medical reasons, can be a little bit more lenient. But that is one of the questions that I saw that was posed to our church on the different on our different sites for the diocese. And so that's one of the things. And I saw Bishop Yusuf's answer to it, but I would like to see what y'all would think about that. I'll let y'all know like kind of how our patriarchal system looks at it.
Wait, about like the disabilities or about
Yes, so if you, with today's technology, you can, for the majority of the time, see if a baby will be born without arms, limbs, Down syndrome, autism. Go ahead.
I don't think that our church supports it because I think that's a cross that God put in your life and in that kid's life, and that you just have to carry that, and that's the plan that He has for you. And I don't think you can just back out of it because you don't like it.
So does that mean we shouldn't do any of these testing then? Because then what's the point? If I can't do anything about it, why get tested and make sure the baby's healthy?
Because it will help you prepare.
Yeah.
Because if you know
Like,
about
at the
beforehand and
time.
you're mentally ready and you have the resources, it will help you prepare for that kind of hard lifestyle.
Go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of times they're wrong. Like they say like your child's gonna be disabled forever, and then they like find out that the baby's actually perfectly fine. So you can't just like assume that the tests are 100% accurate when they're not.
You know, science is not about science and the Bible don't go hand in hand. They just don't. I mean, science tries to disprove the Bible. Science uses genetic manipulation to correct your DNA, and that's what they're studying now. So, a baby, an infant that is biologically not perfect. Once you identify that specific DNA and they try to correct for that by manipulating that chromosome, you want to take a Down syndrome baby and possibly correct for it, or a patient or an infant that you know is going to be born with a rare disease such as hemophilia, and you try to correct for that factor 8 or factor 9 gene. So, if what we're saying is God gave you that baby, and I think this is where they're getting at, and you're supposed to just take it for what it is, or do you condone the science and the technology for able to correct for that? Should we correct for that?
I mean, at the same time, though, like for that argument, like I don't disagree with correcting it. Like if you have the resources to correct it, like I think you could correct it. But like at the same time, like it's not gonna work if God really wants to put that this.
You're not taking a life away,
right?
And I think that's okay. That's where I'm
Well,
trying to get.
Because even then, like even if they try to correct it and it doesn't work, then God wanted you to be stuck with it. Like contraception, they're gonna get to this in a little bit, but I could be on birth control and I still, could get pregnant. If that's God's will, then He's gonna put that in your life. So even if you have like the resources and that kind of stuff, like it's the same thing with any medical treatment. Like I could do this, or I could just live with the cross God gave me. Well, I might try to treat it, and then if it's not gonna go away, God isn't just gonna let it go away. Like His will is still.
But there are countries on this point. There are countries in Europe where the Down syndrome is almost eradicated because they do the testing
Abortions, yeah.
and they have abortions. You can look at both sides because there's elements that you can do during testing where you can actually fix the problem. Like there was just this last week where they did an in vitro operation on an infant or a embryo or a fetus while it was still in the mother's womb, and they corrected a heart defect.
Yeah.
So there's some things that you can actually do while
That was a structural.
Yeah, it was a structural abnormality, but
Yeah.
there's some things like Down syndrome or whatnot.
It's
You're not
only a
gonna
point.
be
No,
able
but
to
I
do
mean-
anything. But there are countries
Yes.
that have eradicated certain disabilities because, like
Russia's
Down
one of
syndrome.
them, actually. Up
Yeah.
until recent times, Russia was one of the higher rates of countries that went through abortion when they found out specific genetic malfunction that will end up with autism or Down syndrome. And just recently, they started switching back to that. But
But
I kind of want to pick up where she just went on.
I think it's
Okay.
perfect the point that we're drawing here.
Mhm.
I think it's okay, and I'm curious to hear what Sayidna says because, I mean, medical advancement, if it allows you to do and correct for these kind of things, that doesn't go against pro-life. What I think goes against pro-life is taking away that fetus, that heartbeat, that living being.
Exactly, and that's where it comes in. Like the church is very lenient when it comes to using technology to help further a unborn child's success in life. But as far as you saying there's no hope for this baby, that I should terminate, then that's where it's kind of crossing that line. And so, this technology of finding out what's going on with the baby has only come out in the past couple of decades. So before that, we had people that were born with all sorts of disabilities. That does not mean that God's will in their life is, non-existing. Like, I'm sure some of y'all know who this person is, but his name is Nick from Australia. He was born without any limbs, no arms, no legs. Imagine if he was as a fetus, they did the ultrasound, they told their parents, like, your kid is not going to be successful in life, no limbs at all, he can't work, he can't do anything. you should probably abort him. Now, this is just one example, but if you know this person, he's a very huge Christian motivational speaker, travels the world, and through him, so many people have grown closer to Christ. So he's one example of no matter what you see handicapping a person, God can use that person to touch a lot of people through different ways. So that's just one example of a person that, although might look disabled, probably when he was born, could have been aborted, but he ended up being a huge success.
And to add on to that, while this is one reason as to why some abortions happen, like the fear of the child being born with a disability, or any tests that show that the child will be born with a disability, that doesn't take away from the fact that it will survive. So that shouldn't be, that's not a very viable argument. Now, many of the popular reasons as to why people get abortion is because, say she's a young mother and she still goes to college or she still goes to school and she's not financially stable yet. That's one popular reason as to why. So the whole point is it comes down to selfish reasons, more about the mother than the child's life. People that argue for abortion try to make it about the child, saying that they don't want the child to be born in a world that is like this or because of their conditions. It mostly comes down to the woman herself and her not wanting to take care of the child, not the other way around.
And that's actually a huge issue in a lot of underdeveloped countries is more people than not use abortion as a way of limiting how many children they have because they can't afford to feed those children. So in a lot of countries where they don't have easy access to contraceptives, after the third or fourth child, they can't afford to feed them anymore. They just go get aborted, and sometimes it's later on in the trimesters, and so they feel like that's the only choice they have. And so unfortunately, it's there's easier ways, and we're going to get to contraceptives, but there's easier ways to not lead to a pregnancy than it is to wait to be pregnant and then try to destroy a life that isn't yours.
What are you talking?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Well, he was first. I'm gonna let him say something.
Couple points on that. The test you see, like for Down syndrome,
Yeah.
that's the alpha fetoprotein test, and that's not a definitive test, so they can predict.
Absolutely.
But that's not a definitive test.
Absolutely.
That's not saying, well, the alpha fetoprotein test was positive, therefore the child will have Down. No.
No, it's all
Right.
probability.
And that's why I think like when they say, well, we eradicated it in Europe.
Yeah.
Well, once you stop abortions for that, it's not also. Once you eradicate it and now you stop, it's still gonna come back because
Absolutely.
that's not like a hereditary thing.
No, it's a gene turning off and on.
But it is a mutation. It could be environmental factor, it could be multifactorial, so it's not like they can eradicate it and just stop. No, that's never gonna happen. They're going to continue always have abortions for that and for those reasons with using a non-definitive test. So all that is crap. You see what I'm saying? Like
No, absolutely.
it's not
It's a very
good.
good point. Yeah. Yeah, did you have something?
I just wanted to go back to this is where I thought you were going with this. So one of the things that I have a real problem with now, babies having Down syndrome and no legs and all that. I mean, obviously that's a challenge that you have to be willing to take on.
Absolutely.
There are solutions though. There's adoption. There's there are other ways to take care of this. And where I thought this was going was the issue of this is almost so. For those of you that are not familiar with this is kind of almost like a modern day eugenics program. I mean, it really is. Honest to God, this is like one of the most evil things. I don't usually say the word hate, but I really hate this idea, this concept, just because of this. It's almost eugenics. It's basically we're going to breed the kids we want to breed, right? Down syndrome, missing legs, missing toes. I mean, we develop technology based on needs, right? So I have a very good friend of mine who once made the observation that if we had allowed the federal government to be involved in tuberculosis treatment, we'd have the best iron lung in the world, but no vaccine for tuberculosis, because we develop things based on need. So if we have a child, or currently with all the wars and all the magnificent advances we've done in limb replacement surgery, that would not have come out if not for people needing limbs.
Absolutely.
So just because the child is affected doesn't mean that the child can't be successful or even productive and add to the world.
Absolutely.
So
Well,
before we, go ahead.
This whole thing started as a eugenics program. Planned Parenthood was founded by this lady named Margaret Sanger, who was literally just a racist, who wanted to eradicate black kids. Like, that was literally her goal. They have all these writings of her saying that she wants to eradicate the black population, and if she can start abortion, she can whatever. So she put up all these clinics in, like, black communities, and to this day, like, black kids, like, black babies, have a, like, 3 times higher rate of being aborted than, like, white people, because she did that on purpose. She designed it. That's how this started, was eugenics, like, and it's just gonna continue in that path.
So, you said a part of your answer was that adoption is an option, correct? And this is a common argument that pro-life people have, that you can always adopt, you can always give them up for adoption. But in regards to our community, our Egyptian community, adoption is looked down upon, correct? So if you were to bring forth that argument to someone that's arguing for pro-choice, how would you address that? Because it's very easy for us to say, oh, adoption is an option, just you adopt and we don't.
Right.
You know.
Well, that's,
so how would you address
that's more of a cultural thing, right? So the idea of adoption, unfortunately, in Egyptian culture, is that idea of the bloodline continuing, right? My son has to have my name, my children.
Yeah, but where was that done? Egypt.
Right.
Egypt as a society does not condone adoption.
And that's
You know why?
I think
Because
that's
it's an
because of
Islamic
Islam.
country,
Yeah.
and Islam does not
Yeah.
allow for it. So as a society, Christians are not going to go against Islamic ways.
Yeah.
But you look at Christians
Christians across the
in
world.
this country, or Australia, Canada, United
Yeah.
States, as Coptic Orthodox Christians, and I see what's going on, and I try to go to the Coptic orphans and see if I can adopt a baby from Egypt. I can't, and I live here because the Egyptian government won't allow it. So I think it's a fallacy to say that as Coptic Orthodox, we don't allow it,
Right.
It's not that we don't allow it. I think that it's
or don't condone it, or don't accept
No, I
it.
think it's just a concept that's foreign, right? So I think adoption, because I know couples that have adopted, right, and they're seen as out of the norm. Like, it's not, like everybody thought, oh, this is the adopted. I mean, not cruelly, not in a negative way, but it's
We're not used to it.
right. It stands out.
Mhm.
It's something that is not culturally the norm. Now, whether or not it's a byproduct of Islam, it probably is. I don't know that part, but okay, I don't have no problem with that. That's fine. But as a society, we have developed a concept of lineage, right? Lineage is important, and and even Paul, like, if you want to bring this back to the biblical argument, even Paul makes that argument that the Corinthians became very not the Corinthians, the Ephesians became very lax about their Christian status because they've adopted the faith. But he says, remember, the Jews are the original holders of the faith, and if Christ cut off the branch of Judaism and grafted the wild branch of the Gentiles, remember, it can always go backwards, right? And so that concept, even in Christianity, of that straight lineage from father to son to down the line, that's hard to break. That's hard to and I don't think anybody does it intentionally. I think just the idea is, if I'm going to have children, absolutely, I'm going to have mine.
Right.
Absolutely.
And like when I said that our community doesn't condone, I'm not saying it doesn't condone it, because obviously it's a personal choice. Like, for me personally, I'd be open to adoption, but I think it is a stigma that is carried from Egypt to here. Plus, seeing the amount of immigrants that come from Egypt to here and so forth, it is a stigma, and I feel like our generation and then the people that have come here and grown up here, they can change that. But my whole point is, before we say, okay, yeah, adoption is an option, we should do as we speak. We should, our actions should show that, because I had an argument with a friend that is very, very pro-choice, and she directly asked me, she was like, would you adopt? I told her adoption is, it's a choice, but she said, would you personally adopt? And I said, yeah, I would, but I don't think many people, when asked that question, would respond confidently in that, given our culture and what is within it. That's the whole point. So I feel like it is a personal choice, but we should always cover that topic, because we can't ignore the fact that it's a huge stigma coming from a whole other country. You know? But,
Good point.
yeah.
So one of our favorite verses that kind of pinpoints back to the argument that we believe life begins at the moment of conception is Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. So that kind of gives light on the idea that we are conceived through a miracle, and we're not just a fetus going through this progression stage until we are born, and then life happens.
Can I just say one thing before you move on? I think, when Mike was saying that science and religion conflict, that's something that people who believe they are very scientific and therefore atheists like to promote. But in actuality, it is the exact opposite. The more science evolves, the more it proves what the Bible said from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Like, now we know that there's a heartbeat and whatever, and all, but the Bible already said before you were in the womb. So by the time science catches up, it just goes to confirm. And like, even, Christopher Columbus thought the world was flat. That wasn't that long ago. Job, in the book of Job, God says, where were you when I, created the circle of the earth? So, by the time science catches up, it proves what the Bible said from the very beginning. So I just wanted to put that out there, because they don't actually conflict. By the time science gets it right, it realizes what the Bible said.
And it's all about, and those kind of, I absolutely agree with you. Those kinds of things are more driven by the local culture, because, like, for example, all the early Renaissance scientists were monks. Like, they were all priests and monks, and the idea behind science was the study of the nature of the creation of God. That was the actual so that was kind of like the like an Athenian import to Christianity, right? They saw the understanding that in Greek culture, logic was the highest form of intelligence, and so they took that and said, well, if logic exists and we can logically analyze nature, then we can use that to understand the Bible, and that's where the whole idea of the Renaissance came.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the church's stance on contraceptives. So the Bible never really specifically addresses the use of contraceptives, but individuals like St. Augustine, for example, he stated that any form of birth control or contraception that is not, or other than abstinence, is considered a sin, which I don't think many of us knew, including me. And it also stated that the church only encourages the use of contraceptives for serious medical purposes only, and that looking at that, given that it's not very specifically addressed, while the stance of abortion or the stance of those that support the use of contraceptives might seem stronger than that of the church's stance, but it isn't necessarily the case. But yeah, the church mostly condones contraceptives only for serious medical purposes.
There's actually one section in the Bible sort of talks, I'll talk to you about that later, just so you're aware there is one basis for that.
So the church more tackles family planning and responsibility. So the use of contraceptives, there's medical, practical, and economic concerns for it. Like I kind of discussed, medical as far as, maybe the mother is not ready to carry a pregnancy, maybe she has health issues that would jeopardize her life and the baby's life. Practical as in, maybe it's not the right timing economically if they can't afford to have a baby. So there's different reasons why people might not be at the stage of, not at the stage where they need to, be kind of selfish in the reason where they let themselves go, and they need to plan to either avoid a pregnancy or plan for a pregnancy. And so the many factors that go into it, makes it kind of a gray zone for our church as far as contraceptives go. But they say that you should talk to your father of confession, and it's an individual basis, and your father of confession will take in all the circumstances and tell you which way to go through that. So, it's not a yes or no as far as abortion go, but contraceptives is one of those things where it's a case by case.
And that is it. So we laid out the background of abortion and the church's stance on it and the church's stance on contraceptives, but now we want to leave it to y'all to discuss or debate about what your stance is on it, because I know most of us are in support of pro-life. I feel like that's most of us, but if you do not support pro-life, you can also talk about that. We just want the debate to begin. So now we
Can we back up to the contraception, because every woman faces that. I can understand the medical reasons. I had a tough time with the economic. We all live here in the United States. Obviously, you can afford to have 1 or 2 baby. You're socially responsible. But what about countries that where look at Africa?
Yeah.
They have famine and mothers give life to 10, 20 children, so on and so forth. And they're starving.
Well, that's what it's saying. It supports planning for those stances. So one of the things that Bishop Yusuf was saying was, for most people in our church, we fast, right? We plan our fasting. If you can look at the calendar and plan the fast of the year, what to avoid and what not, then abstinence should not be a difficult thing. We live in a world where we understand ovulation cycles. We understand, if you procreate this time of the month, then you're more likely to conceive. So we live in a time where we understand these basic things. So the number one thing, especially in countries that don't have the capability of using the contraceptives, the after morning pill, abstinence is the best key. So that's why the church really strongly encourages planning, so that parents don't have to wait until they're pregnant to then go through the stages of, I can't.
So the church has a role to
kids.
play in education and planning.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So the church really truly encourages planning, just because you don't want to wait till you're pregnant to decide this is my 5th kid, I can't afford them, then I need to go get an abortion. It kind of strongly solidifies understanding, what to avoid in abstinence from periods of having, sexual intercourse, so that you don't get pregnant if that is something you can't carry through.
Did you guys talk to him about what his thoughts are about adoption?
Well, adoption is actually. So I was at a convention with Father Anthony, and he actually gave a good 45-minute talk about adoption. And his thing was we need to break the stigma of adoption being terrible. He was for adoption. He was actually saying that adoption is actually very much a Christian thing, because as Christians we were without parents in this world. The Israelites were God's chosen people, and as Gentiles we were kind of forsaken, and God came for us and adopted us. So he was saying adoption is very much a Christian thing. Adoption is a heart thing. So if God puts in your heart where you can go and save, these children, doesn't matter how they end up or whatever things that you might look at and be like, oh, they might end up this way or end up that way. You do your best to love them as a Christian and raise them properly in the right way, and from there you let God's will in their life develop. So
I'm curious, when Anthony, since he lives in Virginia, and so there was that whole thing with Governor whatever his name is, did he say anything about? I'm fascinated by how, not only how open they were about this whole
Infanticide?
you just can't put lipstick on this pig. I don't know what the hell they were thinking. And then he said it out loud. That's the amazing thing. Did he have any kind of insight as to
The church did come out against it, though.
Oh, I'm sure it did, but I'm just wondering if he had any kind of insight as to why we're going in this particular direction. This is incomprehensible to me.
no,
But which
no.
church came out against it?
Bishop Yusuf, the Southern Diocese came out with a statement about the whole concept of infanticide, and it was published, I believe, on the diocese
Right.
website.
Our church, Bishop Yusuf put something, Bishop David put something, but we are, as a percentage, when I'm saying the church, I'm talking about the Christian people across the nation. How many churches, look at the Catholic churches, We have not heard of any of the Catholic churches talking about it. Or the Southern Baptist.
No,
Very, very, very,
Very little.
few.
the
Yeah.
bishops in New York had a statement that came out.
They're not. Dina, you make an excellent point, but that's part of the media bias. If they don't want you to hear about it, you're not going to see it on Facebook, you're not going to see it on Twitter, you're not going to see it on the media, and you're not going to see it
That's
certainly
why
on the
I
news.
think some of these things, when we see a letter issued by Emma David or Emma Yusuf or Emma Serapian, how many times we share stuff on Instagram and Facebook and all these media, but how many of us felt compelled enough to share something like that? To inform the rest,
Mhm.
we say that our community needs education. How many of us take a role in that? That one point I don't know what everybody feels about that, the contraceptive part. That we say it's contraceptive other than abstinence is a sin. How logical and feasible that is when we're talking about, that's feasible for us here, living in the United States with thermometer and calendar, you know? But how feasible is that to people that are living in countries that
Don't have the resources.
No.
they don't even know how to read?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't say
They don't
contraceptive.
even have to read, so how can we say that we're gonna hold them accountable to that sin if they don't know how to use other than
Mhm.
someone knocking on their door every morning and giving them a pill and say, take this, because literally that's what happened
Yeah.
in some of these communities. That some woman organization knocks on their door and gives them the pill and say, take this, right? So I don't know what do you all think?
So the church does not say contraceptive is a sin. I just wanted to clarify that. I thought I had made that clear, but it does not say that contraceptive is a sin. It says contraceptive is one of those things where it's a gray area, and it's a case by case, and at the end of the day, that's something between you and God. So it stands very strongly on abortion, but as far as contraceptives go, like Tantina said, people all over the world are in different situations, and you can't hold everyone in the same boat as each other.
And
What
just
does
on-
the church think about abortion for somebody who's been raped?
It actually still stands against abortion for that.
Okay,
Because
well,
of
let
it,
me ask you a little bit more about that, because if that's the case, alright, let's say a girl, an Orthodox girl,
yeah.
virgin. I'm gonna use one of my old schools from San Antonio because it's also known to, like, they always send out, like sexual assault or whatnot. Let's say an Orthodox girl in San Antonio who goes to St. Mary's University,
Yeah.
walking back to her car, gets raped, now she's pregnant.
Okay.
She's not from a wealthy family and she can't afford to take care of that child.
Okay.
This girl is on a scholarship because she's a straight A student. Now what does she gotta do? She gotta drop out of school to take care of that child, or
Well, she can put him up for adoption, but as far as what the church sees is that child is not responsible for the sin that was committed through rape. That child is an innocent child. So we go through situations in life where through, the sin that entered into the world, many things happen that are wrong. But as far as correcting a wrong with a wrong, the church frowns upon that. You don't correct one wrong with another wrong.
well, we also frown upon adoption as well, as we can.
We do not frown
So the
upon
church,
that.
Not the
church
church,
does not
but as
frown upon
culture.
adoption, yeah.
So that's where you gotta break up the stigma between church and
I
culture.
understand.
Yeah.
But now you're gonna talk about like this girl who lives in an Egyptian community where it's
Yeah.
frowned upon to give that child up for adoption, and not just that, but like it's her parents, they gotta face that every
Yeah.
single day. So she either gotta keep it or she has to terminate, because if she gives it up for adoption, it still looks
Okay, but then
frowned
again,
upon.
now it's like an argument between
What people
how
think.
what people think, how people see you, and what doing the right thing is.
Yeah,
Because we're
exactly.
not about doing the wrong thing so people see us as
Yeah.
right.
You care more about what
That's
God
what we
thinks.
should do is not care whether we should.
Exactly.
whether
So
how
we take care of that. But in
However,
regards
that's
to
not
like,
how we act, is it? Because we always
We're
act
not
it.
gonna change the whole culture though
Yeah.
right now,
Right,
but it's a
But you're also you're using the exception to disprove the rules. I mean, let's be honest about this. And you were talking about this earlier. How many?
What's the
How many? Yeah.
percentage?
What's the percentage of people?
0.05%.
Yeah,
Whatever it is.
People who are raped or
Whatever it is,
They
it's
get
a low
10%.
percentage, right? It's clearly under.
Yeah, we can always find a needle in a
Right.
haystack.
There's
I mean,
always
you know.
there's always an exception to the rule, but that doesn't mean that for the 90+% of people that get adoption just as a form of birth control, This does not apply.
No, I'm talking about like rape specific.
No, I know, but I mean, it's such a.
I'm taking the small percentage, and I'm looking at these cases saying,
But you
how
can't
does the
make,
church
but you
do it?
can't make a rule based on the
Yeah.
minute exception. I
But-
mean, that's like saying, you know, I shouldn't exercise any at all because I might sprain my ankle.
I'm
I
not saying the
also
church
like-
should
hold
be
on,
okay
but
with
I
abortion
also
because of
think-
that small percentage. I'm saying the church looks at that small percentage. If the church looks solely at that 1%, now you're looking at 100% of rapes.
But that's an emotional argument.
But
That doesn't-
listen, in this situation also, adoption is still a very feasible thing in that situation. It's looked, it's
Yeah.
frowned upon when we're adopting, but I think when somebody is giving it up for a situation like that, I think that's a little bit different.
But
than
I
what
wanna
we're
say
talking
something
about.
about the frowned upon for adoption, and, it is true that it is stigmatized, it's not something that's encouraged. It is illegal in Egypt, and so that it's a mute point in that country, and you can't adopt anyone from. But I wanna say that even as society as a whole, not just the Egyptian culture, the percentage of children that get adopted is very small, because it is a heavy cross. There's not too many of us who go and get a cross for ourselves. Like, we already don't want the crosses we already have, we don't go get a cross. And when you talk about children with disabilities, you can put them up for adoption, absolutely. But how many of us are adopting children and then also adopting handicapped, special needs children? Like, I mean, I think it's very important that we have this discussion and have an understanding of our church's stance, but I also think we need to see about how we can be part of the solution. And there's a few statistics, and these are the statistics that people who don't put their kids, who have abortions, who don't put children up for adoption use, because this makes them feel better. So there are over 400,000 kids in foster care. 100,000 kids are eligible to be adopted. A child enters into foster care every 2 minutes. Okay, now listen to this part. According to national statistics approved by ARROW, 40 to 50% of those children will never complete high school. 60% of them will be homeless or go to jail within 1 year of leaving foster care at the age of 18. 80% of the prison population was once in foster care. It's hard. When Kathleen and I were reading this, it was hard. Like, we didn't want to read anymore.
Yeah, the older they get, the worse the.
It's tough. It's tough.
Not
And
to mention
how are
the
we part of the
sexual
solution?
abuse that they go
The sexual
through, and
abuse.
that's why they end up messed up kids that do all the crimes that cause them to end up in jail.
They have a 4 times higher like suicide rate than the general.
Absolutely.
And I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that we can help with.
Right,
too.
and that's what I'm saying, is like, what we wanna take from this absolutely is to understand our church's stance, to vote that way, to support it politically, to be vocal like Dina said about it, you know, all of those things, but then also, we need to be part of the solution. What's happening to those kids that are in foster care? We are against abortion, and we know why, but how are we part of the solution? And we need to be part of the solution. And maybe we can't all adopt, maybe that's not something that, you know, you're able to do, whether from a family standpoint or whatever. There's a lot of social aspects in your family, if that's going to be supported or not, or if your spouse or your mate or your children or whatever are going to support you. But think about what you can do. What can you do? What can you do for children who are in foster care? What can you do for children who are leaving foster care, and where are they going to go? I mean, I think the statistics of what happens to them, and you know, we talk about pros and cons, and the reason that we actually did this research is because I've heard from pro-choice people say, and unfortunately the numbers support it, is that you are anti-abortion, you don't want to kill them when they're in the womb, but yet you give them the death penalty after they've been tortured their whole life. So we are in support of the death penalty, but not in support of abortion, but a lot of those children go through the system, end up exactly there.
How many of those, how many people in the United States, and you can look it up, spend millions of dollars trying to conceive every year because they cannot have kids?
Absolutely.
And they're willing to take shots, do in vitro, do all sorts of procedures, and they can make a decision, a simple decision, by going on and adopting. And we have it in the Catholic community, and it's frowned upon. Our church needs to do a better job, and I'll be the first to say, They don't like to talk about it. They don't go there. But how many families are trying to conceive and they don't want to face and tackle that subject?
And it's something that kind of baffles me about this whole thing is that, again, arguments for pro-life and pro-choice, we always try to make it seem like our argument is for the sake of the baby. But from what I've heard so far, it's all about us. So pro-choice, they don't want to bear a child because of their financial instability, for their personal reasons, for their wrongs, for their culture, for their life. And then for us, for pro-life, we want to save them, but again, we don't want to adopt. We don't want to support them. So I feel like this whole argument from both sides, we're not even focusing on the life of that baby at all. At all. And so you're absolutely right, and you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that we are the change, that we don't just, preach and then not do anything about it. Expect other people to do the change, and then for us to be like, yeah, but we're behind the idea.
I love the fact that you're raising awareness because, again, I can't stand media, and I can't stand lying and trying to manipulate people's mind and calling this entire subject women's health. This is not about women's health. It's a joke. It's a liberal satire.
Hey, stretch marks are important.
Yeah. Stop.
But yeah, absolutely. And back to the stigma about our culture, we're not adopting. I think slowly through these upcoming generations, we're trying to break that.
I
And
totally
now,
agree with that. I do think that this newer generation coming through, I think it's hopefully gonna change things. People that are coming from Egypt, yes, that's gonna be a little bit harder for them, but I think the people that are here, I think it's gonna be a little bit.
Just like I'm laughing now.
No, we are the same culture like you.
But in Egypt, are they open to adoption?
Yeah, we do.
But it's not allowed in Egypt.
Yeah, but we can do it.
How can you do it?
Don't ask questions. No.
if he tells you he'll have to kill you.
It's not in favor. Like you can look rules in it, but we can do it as a lawyer. We can use lawyers. But we have this culture over there.
So again, it's this generation that's coming in, right? The
No,
younger
I mean-
generation, I think, is a little more open
No,
to it than
I
like
don't
our
know. We
parents
can
were.
do it on the table.
Yeah.
That's all.
I think she just
Um,
means that it's very restricted over there.
Yeah.
Here we have more freedom to actually do it in a big number.
And even if you can't adopt a child
I
now,
guess some people think even in Egypt or Christians, they have Muslim culture.
They have what?
They absolutely adopt things from the Muslim culture. Yes, they
It's
do.
not adopt, but you're conformed
You're
by
conformed.
the law.
Yeah.
You're conformed by
It's
the
the
law.
law.
It's not a
Even like cultural things like why do we wear black when somebody dies? That again in Muslim. Why do we?
That's a Quranic tradition.
Okay, but it came also with the Muslims. That's when it
It's
became
Quranic.
popular. But that's when it became a popular thing.
Don't argue.
Different.
Why
this is next week's debate.
do men and women sit on different sides of the church? That's not.
No, I agree with that.
That one is
Moving on.
But yes, hopefully
That
as
is where
No, but I tell you, so here's a solution. Here's a solution that I would recommend. For most of us, we can't adopt per se to bring a child from Egypt here, but we can give money to the different organizations to help the children that are foster childs there.
I'll
So
tell you one realistic, because you brought this up and I think it's an excellent point. One of the realistic limitations on adoption in the U.S., I don't know about anywhere else, but generally speaking, you're not talking about infants, right? So, you're talking about older children, and they're generally more than one. They're siblings, because well, I mean that too, of course, but the adoption system here in the U.S. is geared towards taking them back to the original parents. So when CPS or whoever it is that does this here in Texas, they remove a child from home, their goal is to return the child to the home. So only unless there's absolutely no other way to do it, there's no family member, there's no extended family, there's the original parents can't be are not suitable for any reason. It's only until they run out of every single option they can possibly come up with is when those kids come up for adoption, and then it's usually siblings. So you take that and you compound the issue of are you willing to adopt one baby? Great, but now you're talking about a 5-year-old and a 12-year-old, and those are two very different children, right? And whoever's okay with adopting one is not gonna be okay with adopting the other.
Well, I mean, that's
That's a
valid
very
point.
peculiar
Yeah.
case. I don't think that's the case with everyone. I mean, people adopt from children all over the world. I mean, a lot of people in America adopt children from foreign countries.
Well,
And so,
I can't speak to the world, but
Yeah.
here in Dallas, I'm not gonna get into the details, but I've looked into this, and
Yeah.
this is the wall I'm running into.
okay.
Something I've experienced just last week.
Why are
there
we
was-
focusing on the other phone?
Give me 1 second. Hold that thought.
Fine, can't hear you better.
Go ahead.
But something I experienced just last week, there was a kid, he was 15-year-old, foster care, and he was running away from a foster home because I don't know the reasons, but it probably was abuse reasons. And while he was running, he didn't see the car, he got hit by a car, had traumatic brain injury, which basically he's paralyzed, like can't feed himself, can't dress himself and stuff, and he's feeding with a tube and totally different. But there was another foster home that was about to take him and willing to adopt, but once they found out about his conditions, they were like, no. So technically, I was speaking to a therapist and they told me that the hospital is going to be his home. That's it. So this is something that, I mean, looking at it from a different way, some parents are not prepared for high medical needs like that. So I think like adoption would be so hard on them, but it is something to consider when you're adopting, and I think that's why some people wouldn't.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if your child if you have two kids, they're yours or adopted. It doesn't matter what happens; they're both gonna need at one point or another medical needs. You know, like I think that's an extreme example. But everyone who has a kid, and I don't have a kid, so I'm not the best at talking for this. But everyone who has a kid has probably at least one time or another taken their kid to the hospital. So if you have a kid, you're gonna have medical expenses. It doesn't matter if you had them per se or you adopted them. There's gonna be medical expenses, and you can't foresee traumatic events like that in life. I mean, they can happen to anyone. So.
And you bring a good point, but I feel like, I mean, if you help someone at least help someone. It's like, again, these are extreme points, but they're still there.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. And if you can take care of someone with extreme medical needs, then by far do it. But at least help someone. Just because there are cases on the opposite side of the spectrum does not mean you shouldn't help anybody at all.
I think one of the biggest faults that, as a human nature, that people have with adoption is, well, what if this kid ends up being, a thief or a murderer, or ends up being like this? Well, at the end of the day, that is
fail.
your,
They do fail.
No, they come with a lot of these kids that go into these systems and stuff, like, come from homes, like, statistically, come from homes where, like, the parents are incarcerated, or they've been abused for some reason, or whatever,
And
and so,
those parents have failed.
yeah, but then you as a parent, like, these kids come with genetic, like, dispositions to different things.
We're not talking about genetics, we're talking about
this is
crime
not,
statistics.
just because
Yeah,
your
but
parent,
they could become criminals because they're genetic, like, it's genetic, like, they can have
From the
these
trauma.
tendencies
But
and
genetics
these, yeah.
and environment
no, that's,
play,
that, yeah,
like, equal roles on
yeah,
this.
yeah, your environment
It's also
can,
multifactorial, so it can
I'm just making about, look, I don't wanna get into the
No,
weeds
but
on
there
this,
can be genetic predispositions to mental health issues and those kind of things. But there are societal, environmental factors of the abuse that they already faced, of being born with fetal alcohol syndrome, of all kinds of things. I mean, among those statistics for children in foster care is that they have higher rates of post-traumatic stress disorder than veterans. They've experienced a lot. So there's biological things. The only thing is, you need to know that when you're caring for them. That shouldn't be a barrier to caring for them, but it should be part of the education you have when you go into having this type of service. Because parents who go in thinking they're going to adopt a little angel with a halo and having no idea that they're going to face challenges, the same potential challenges you have with your own natural born children. All of those things are possible as well. But you should have realistic expectations of the type of commitment that you're making, because that is going to be an important part of the care of potentially foster or adopted children.
And we should forget that God's going to be with us regardless, right? I feel like he can do a lot of things through our lives that we can't even imagine doing. So we should not forget that he's there for us, especially if we're doing like a good act. If we're doing it through his name, then he won't leave us alone.
And you know, and there's no guarantee that, like, let's say none of this is true, right? Like, I have a 5-year-old, right? There's no guarantee that he's not going to grow up to be Mussolini or something. I mean, I hope not, obviously. But that would be a reflection. But that would be no. But the point I was trying to make is that would be a reflection on me as a parent, because it's my job to instill my beliefs and my expectations on him. Now it's his job to then fulfill those and live those. But you know, because there's only so much I can, as a parent, there's only so much you can do. But that's exactly what you're asked to do. So you know, this whole argument of it's difficult. Well, it's gonna be difficult no matter what.
Yeah.
You know, you're always gonna hit a brick wall where you have to bang your head against it.
Absolutely. Paul? Yeah.
I had one question. So you said that you were at one point open to adopting a Coptic child. So would you only be open to adopting a Coptic child, or anyone else, even if they're not the same religion as us?
No, I'm open to. We're open to anyone. It's just no. The reason why we got into it is because I know Nermeen on a personal basis. I've known her for 15, 20 years, and then she was just starting that whole Coptic orphan thing, and it kind of got me interested. And I said, hey, what's the likelihood? How many people from in the United States go there? You're doing a great service, and actually adopt because they can't have kids here. And she said, oh yeah, we've approached the church, the organization, and they didn't want to touch the subject with the government. But there are ways, and the ways are to go, bribes and try, and it's still dangerous.
Right.
But that's not the right way of doing it. But as far as going and getting a Russian kid or an Asian kid or whatever, no, that's fine. No, but you see Egypt because we're so attached to Egypt. That's why it crossed our minds.
No, just out of curiosity. But
Yeah.
And Nermeen doesn't just focus on kids that don't have parents, right? But
Without parents at all. They're all fathers. Yeah, they all have moms.
They're fatherless or whatever. But
right.
That organization has evolved.
Right.
And they provide amazing services.
Right.
Now it's like jobs.
Right. And you go in and they give.
You go in, and then the sponsorships that we all can do. As a matter of fact, you want to talk about actually helping. Just because you can't have those kids are very happy because now they see value. And what she's brought to that organization is each of us can sponsor a child for as little as $60 a month, and that provides not only their education support. When they get to high school, so anyway, it costs a lot of money for private tutoring. Money goes there, the clothes on their backs, the books, all of that. So what's $60 a month? And you want to be able to support a family, and it's amazing. They write you letters, they send you pictures, and it is very, very, very touching and heartwarming. You can find reasons, to think, oh, I can't have kids, but you know what? They'll open up doors for you actually to go and visit with them when you travel to Egypt. You become emotionally attached. So there's a lot of ways that we can help.
That's good. Cool.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
One last thing before we finish up. There's a movie that came out, has Mark Wahlberg in it. I just saw it not too long ago. It's called Instant Family. It's actually based off of a true story here in America where these two couples went and adopted this kid, but they ended up having two siblings, and it was 3 little kids. And they adopted the 3 little kids, and the movie's based about that. It just came out a couple months ago. It's on Netflix. It's a really good movie, and it actually gives you a real perspective of like adopting kids and how some of the issues that arise from it, but also the benefits and like how it brings the whole family together. So if you have time, watch it. It's a good movie.
I have a question. A couple of months ago when we were talking about different moral issues, I have a book called Moral. It has the title was Moral Issues, Current Society Moral Issues, and we were circulating the book around so everyone can take a look and see what are the issues that were there. And I don't know where the book ended up, but if you had happened to pick it up to look at something by chance and you still have it, if you don't mind to look around to see if you still have it. But that's, I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Was a great book.
Was.
Current society moral issues or something like that. And it has a picture of
I think it was Jesus, right?
yeah, Jesus on top of it, and it's sponsored by Empatherapy. So if you open the page, you Jesus.
But yeah.
Just in case you were looking at it and by chance it ended up with you.
But in general, I'm glad that we can at least talk about this topic. I think we sometimes have a general idea of the church's stance on things, but then it's a matter of our stance on it as well. And I feel like it's important to talk about these things, and there will be times or topics of debate that we won't be in agreement. Like whenever we were discussing the death penalty, there was some disagreement. But putting it out there and sharing our reasons behind why we think a specific way is important, and I hope that our generation kind of helps create that change, because talking about something and actually doing something to help it is completely different.
It's not a black and white issue, right? And you know, whether you're on this side of the fence or this side of the fence, and I think it's easy to get caught up into the weeds. Just think through and not to take a brush stroke and force yourself to be in a box. So even our church has a position with pro-life, but that also allows, for those cases. And I think if you're having conflicts or conflicted, then you just go back, pray about it, seek out the priest and talk to them through about those specific issues. And it's easy for people to drive you into the weeds. But I think ultimately at the end, I think what you were trying to say is that, you know what? Life does begin at conception. It is wrong to go down the path of infanticide. There are circumstances that allow for abortion, to happen if it's the life of the mother on an operating table. But you also have options and choices when it comes to, bringing the beautiful being into life and putting them up for adoption and then protecting that position. So it's broader than saying I'm pro-life or pro-choice. Thank you.
No problem.